It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. A failure without any mandate to be Prime Minister. Suella Braverman's explosive parting shots against Rishi Sunak ahead of a landmark legal verdict on his migration plan. Children plied with alcohol and cocaine and sexually abused. 7 members of a paedophile gang in Glasgow are found guilty of running a child sex abuse ring. In Gaza, the White House accuses Hamas of using medical facilities to house hostages as overstretched hospitals reportedly prepare mass graves. The government is advised to vaccinate all children under 2 against chickenpox. We hear the deadly impact that the virus can have. As China's president heads to San Francisco for a meeting with Joe Biden, Sky News visits the area of the Pacific, which could become a flashpoint for conflict. The birthday fit for a king. The country marks His Majesty's 75th with gun salutes across the capital. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview at 10:30. Hello there, good evening. When Rishi Sunak sacked Suella Braverman in yesterday's reshuffle, it seemed only a matter of time before she got her revenge. And tonight it came with a parting letter to the Prime Minister, which labelled him a failure without a mandate to be Prime Minister and with a plan that was not working. Well, Downing Street responded by saying that the Prime Minister believes in actions, not words. But tomorrow, Mr Sunak could face another setback when the Supreme Court rules on the government's controversial Rwanda migration plan. Here's our political correspondent, Ali Fortescue.
A warm welcome to those for whom it's their first cabinet, and also welcome to those for whom it may not be their first time. Lovely to have you all here.
A new look cabinet that feels strangely familiar. Prime Ministers past and present, the face of a party promising change. But the old top team, the outgoing Home Secretary, was never going to go quietly. In a damning letter to the Prime Minister, she criticised in particular his immigration policy. She said, "You've manifestly and repeatedly failed to deliver on every single one of these key policies. Either your distinctive style of government means you're incapable of doing so, or, as I must surely conclude now, you've never had any intention of keeping your promises." She goes on, "Someone needs to be honest. Your plan isn't working. We've endured record election defeats. Your resets have failed and we're running out of time. You need to change course urgently." Tom Hunt signed a letter backing Suella Braverman before she was sacked. Since then, he's left government himself.
If you take, probably the most high-profile appointment, which was David Cameron, I do have some slight concerns about the sort of combination of, him coming in and Suella going. I do have some slight concerns about, what that might mean for the future of the party. I think it's, I do think there's been a realignment in British politics with the 2016 Brexit referendum and also the 2019 general election, and I think it's important that we go with the grain on that.
Privately, some MPs on the right are definitely not happy. One told me they think the government's given up on what they call proper conservatism. That is not the view shared by all Conservatives, but those divisions could get deeper because tomorrow the Supreme Court decides whether the Rwanda plan is lawful or not. And that could ignite a big debate about the role of European judges. The idea of processing asylum seekers thousands of miles away in Rwanda has been grounded for over a year. The Prime Minister needs a win in court tomorrow and for the number of channel crossings creeping up to come down.
Do you think the new top team's the right team to stop the boat?
I've got 100% confidence in James Cleverly. He's a clever man. He knows his stuff. He's been round the block a few times. He's a good friend as well. I think he can stop it. I think the foundations have been put in there anyway by Pretty and Suella.
Happy with the direction the party's going in?
Party's marked.
But those foundations have shifted. At a meeting about economic growth today, the Conservative right regrouped.
What do you think of the new look cabinet?
We wouldn't be the one I've chosen.
This is a party that's divisions run deep. The PM's response to the Home Secretary was short. He thanked her and said he believes in actions, not words. Whether or not she still wields any real power, it's clear Suella Braverman's not going quietly. Ali Fortescue, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, joins us now from Downing Street. So, Sam, we knew this Braverman counterattack was coming. Now that it's happened, does it matter?
Well, look, Anna, there is no doubt at the shock and awe quality of the words used in that letter by Suella Braverman. But if you look closely at what she's really saying, quite an interesting picture emerges. Look first at this extraordinary section that suggests that there was a deal between her and Rishi Sunak in order to secure her support, and he would bring her back as Home Secretary when he entered number 10 this time last year, with a detailed set of promises that she says he signed up to in writing, including lowering immigration and leaving the ECHR. Now, there's no sign of this written document at the moment. I understand it might just be an email from Suella Braverman to Rishi Sunak after a meeting that they had, possibly not even one that got a reply. But why is she talking about that deal? Because she wants to construct a betrayal narrative that Rishi Sunak and his allies essentially responsible for the defeat of the Conservative Party, because for her this is all about what comes next. Let's look at the next bit of that letter that matters. That's the personal nature of the attack on Rishi Sunak, where she goes for him, his judgment, his weakness. Why is she doing that? Well, because he sacked her yesterday. And if she is to be in contention, she has to show that he has bad judgment in doing so to help secure her in the top spot. The third thing that that letter does is to talk up herself. She talks about somebody who has delivered in the job of Home Secretary. Plenty of Tory MPs would question that. And also how, although her language may not have been perfect, a concession of some of the trouble that she's caused in the last few days, she nevertheless remains true to a type of conservatism that she has her eyes on the prize of the Tory leadership in the future. But up, there's James Cleverly at the top of the Conservative Home leadership. There's Kemi Badenoch up at second place. She's down at fifth. This letter could just have been described as a Dear Kemi letter, as a Dear Rishi letter. She is fighting for the love of activists now for a contest in the future. There's no army going over the top about to dethrone Rishi Sunak before an election. This is about her ambitions for the future. It's interesting to see whether it works.
Sam, live for us there in Downing Street. Thank you. The NSPCC has called it one of the worst child sex abuse cases in the UK in decades. 7 members of a paedophile gang convicted today over a string of sex crimes against children in a Glasgow drug den. Well, the judge in the trial excused the jury from any future service, telling them the case they'd heard plunged the depths of human depravity. A warning, this report from our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillis contains details that you may find distressing.
Every day for more than 2 months, they came and they went. On trial, accused of the most grotesque crimes. Paedophiles who orchestrated regular nights to rape children. These are the faces of the heroin addicts who operated what was branded a monstrous child sex abuse ring in a drug den. The mugshots of people who laughed as their victims were repeatedly sexually abused after being plied with alcohol and cocaine.
The levels of depravity shown in this case are extremely rare in Scotland, and the courage of the victims was essential in securing this conviction. I think the convictions today speak loud and clear in regards to the abuse and the fact that it won't be tolerated.
It was in this Glasgow community where a youngster was shoved in a microwave and oven, where older children were forced to eat dog food and sexually abuse the youngest as the adults watched.
It really is a highly unusual case. There have been some horrendous cases over the decades, but this one is truly shocking. You can only imagine the terror, and you can only imagine the miserable existence that these children have had.
This was a long and harrowing trial, one where children described living in a confusing and scary world. Throughout the case, the paedophiles laughed and joked in the dock. They sighed and rolled their eyes as graphic abuse was detailed. And on one occasion, one of them, as they entered the court here, told me that the children were liars. This man, Ian Owens, was the ringleader. His ex is disgusted to learn he's a predator.
Any parent hearing this is somebody that you used to go with. You just want to be violently sick. I hope they get the book thrown at them.
Do you think they should ever be allowed to walk the streets again?
No. And I really hope, I don't condone violence, but I really hope when they get sentenced, they'll get what's coming to them, and karma gets you.
The victims have been left traumatised, their lives changed forever, all because of a depraved group of addicts and prolific criminals whose actions have now caught up with them. Conor Gillis, Sky News, Glasgow.
Well, to the Middle East now, and the White House claimed tonight that it had intelligence which showed that Hamas was using one of Gaza's main hospitals to run military operations and store weapons. Tonight, Hamas condemned the claim and said it would give the Israelis a green light to commit what they called further brutal massacres. They called on the UN to investigate. Well, fighting between Israeli soldiers and Hamas militants continued today in the north of the Gaza Strip. The UN says all but one of the hospitals in the area are now completely out of action. The Al Ahli Hospital, reportedly the only facility still taking patients. The Gaza Health Ministry, run by Hamas, said that more than 2,300 people are still trapped inside the Al-Shifa Hospital, the largest in the Strip, and that 170 people were buried there today in a mass grave. Well, the Palestinian Red Crescent says attempts to evacuate patients from the Al-Quds Hospital have failed, where 300 remain without food, water or fuel. The UN says since the 5th of November, 200,000 people have moved through a corridor south opened by the Israeli military, with many of those injured heading to the Al-Aqsa Hospital in central Gaza. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, sent this report from Tel Aviv, and a warning, his report does contain images of injured children.
The first rains have come to Gaza, some light relief, if only for the children. But in the same area, another Israeli airstrike sent yet more injured to one of the few functioning hospitals in central Gaza, where doctors say they are struggling to cope.
The situation gets worse by the day. We get more and more cases because the displaced people are moving. The health service needs to expand at this hospital.
Our team in Gaza filmed some of those displaced who've been ordered to evacuate by the Israeli military.
The Israelis were shouting on loudspeakers. We didn't know where they were. They were shouting, "Evacuate the Al Ahli Hospital." They bombed from the air and the ground. Bullets were flying around.
The corpses have piled up outside Gaza's biggest hospital because so many have died and there isn't the power to refrigerate them, say Palestinians, who are preparing a mass grave. Israelis say they're easing the medical crisis with steps like sending in incubators to Gaza's hospitals, as well as fuel. The World Health Organization says that is a token effort. Only a lengthy pause in fighting will do.
What it needs is the humanitarian break, not just a small few hours of pause, sustained break, resupplying of this hospital, getting power running to the hospitals, either by power grid or by generators.
Israelis are releasing more footage they say justifies their devastating operation in Gaza, including pictures of arms stores, of weapons and rockets. They say they've ordered the emptying of hospitals because they're being used for military purposes by Hamas. This hospital, they say, was used to keep hostages in its basement, but there wasn't much evidence of that, though there were some weapons found there. Israel's confirmed the death of one Israeli soldier taken hostage on October the 7th, killed, says Hamas, in an Israeli airstrike. Relatives and friends of other hostages marched in their hundreds in Tel Aviv, heading for the Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem.
5 weeks into this war, Benjamin Netanyahu is under increasing pressure from friends and allies diplomatically and the international community, but also from his own people.
It's been 39 days since we last had any connection with our loved ones, and I don't know if you ever had lost connection for so long with someone you love, but it drives you insane.
Is the world doing enough to release our families? My government should do more, but definitely for sure, the world should do more.
Their fear is the world forgets their lost relatives and friends and moves on, distracted by the massive loss of life in Gaza, in an Israeli operation that has so far failed to find any of them. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, Tel Aviv.
Well, a family that was trapped in Gaza for weeks has finally been able to return home to Liverpool. Speaking to Sky News, they said there is no safe place in the Gaza Strip, and Hamas and Israel both share blame for what is happening in their homeland. Sky's North of England correspondent Inzamam Rashid has this report.
For over 3 weeks, morning and night, this was reality for one British family. An endless barrage of bombs around their home in Gaza. Packed inside were 27 people, unsure if they were next to be hit. Now out of danger and back in Liverpool, Aladdin and Olfat want to share their story. With their daughter, they were in Gaza City on holiday when Israel's retaliation began following Hamas's massacre on the 7th of October.
At the beginning, we felt very scared. We didn't know what the reaction will be from the Israeli side. Suddenly, everything started bombing, towering, falling down, very close to us, and we didn't know what we have to do, where we have to go.
They listened to the orders of the Israelis and fled south, taking Aladdin's 97-year-old mother with them. And en route to Khan Yunis, they witnessed endless destruction.
I've seen the war on 2008. I've seen the war 2012. I left the country in 2014, the war on 2014, and I had the worst war in my life ever. I've never heard or seen something like this.
But even in a city where they were told they'd be safe, the rockets continued.
There is no at all any safe place in Gaza Strip from north to south. They're just using the air, the sea, and the land in the same time, bombing in everywhere.
All that Olfat could think of were her other 3 children at home in Liverpool.
I was just telling my daughters here and my son, take care of yourself, take care of each other. If we don't come back, just try to be together. I say to Allah, please protect my kids while they are here by themselves.
Worried and helpless, but now there's just anger.
I do blame Hamas for everything. I do blame also Israel for what they have done to us. No one likes Hamas. No one wants Hamas. I don't want Israel on my land, but I don't want to get rid of my people because of that.
It took 6 risky attempts to leave Gaza via the Rafah border with Egypt until Aladdin and his family managed to cross. Now at home, they can only watch, hope and pray that this conflict they've lived through comes to an end. Inzamam Rashid, Sky News, Liverpool.
Well, while the situation deteriorates in Gaza, Israel has been dealing with another threat on its northern border, Hezbollah. Attacks by the Lebanese militant group have been met with a strong military response by Israel. Sky's international correspondent John Sparks has spoken to some of those trapped in between the warring sides.
The war in Lebanon is fought amongst the trees and hilltop communities which form the border with Israel. It's a battle of strike and counter-strike, fast growing in intensity, and tens of thousands have fled.
It looks deserted. Can't see anybody. See if we can find the local priest.
A small number remain, including civilians, in a Christian village called Alma al-Shab. We couldn't find the church, but we did find Milad Eid. What's it been like today?
It was very worse.
It's getting worse.
Oh my God.
Mr. Eid runs the local guest house, seen here, but at least it hasn't been hit.
Well, here you can see the roof over there, and all the glasses get. Even we have there, all trees get burned.
Israeli fire has smashed into outlying districts where factions like Hezbollah have been launching their rockets. In response, Israel has tried to wipe out their cover according to villagers. Trees destroyed by artillery fire and white phosphorus.
It's quite a sight, acres and acres of burnt land, olive trees, fruit trees, and there's a cliff behind it. It's blackened. It's olive harvest time as well, but they won't get anything from these trees.
And the tank, you can see the tank from here.
The sense of dread never leaves.
The water tank.
A shell has punctured their water tank.
The tank over there.
Yeah, I can see it.
And there's a constant whine in the air.
That's the sound of a drone. It's very loud, and there are aircraft as well. You know the Israelis are here. It's just that they're above us, but they certainly make their presence felt.
Its remaining inhabitants now gather at the local shop.
But I tell you, we are not afraid, we are afraid. You won't know. You won't know what's happened. Maybe now Shalom come here, who knows?
Mr. Consul says they're caught in the crossfire of someone else's war.
This battle, does it feel like it's
Have
your
nothing
war?
to do with it. You know, this is the problem. Nothing to do with this war. But actually, it's happened. What can you do?
This is the church, the village church. The door's open. Hello. Monsignor?
We found him outside. Father Ghaffari leads a congregation of 100, but there's only 6 left now.
It's not easy to live. We must stay.
I'm not suicidal, but the situation is bearable. If we leave our village, it could turn into a battlefield. Hezbollah is increasing its operations. The Israelis have threatened an unimaginable response. The residents of the village say it's like living on top of the volcano. John Sparks, Sky News, Alma Al-Shab.
Now, chickenpox parties have been in the headlines recently after a senior civil servant was revealed to have suggested them as a solution to the COVID pandemic. That hinted at the idea that chickenpox is a childhood disease which carries little serious threat. But today, government advisers announced that a childhood vaccination programme for chickenpox should be introduced on the NHS. But some families have learnt at a terrible cost just how dangerous the virus can be. Sky's Alice Porter reports.
Ilana was 3 years old when she developed itchy red spots. She had caught chickenpox off her brother. Ilana's mother, a nurse, wasn't initially worried.
Probably like most mums, I sort of phoned Adam and said she's got chickenpox, but at least she's got it out of the way before she starts school in September.
But Ilana's condition got worse. She became lethargic and was taken to hospital, but died the next day.
We just were doing things that a parent shouldn't be doing, coming home and explaining to our 6-year-old that he wasn't going to see his sister again. So people were like, oh, how's Ilana with her chickenpox? Well, you know, we were in hospital last night and she died. It was horrible.
Currently, a chickenpox vaccine is not widely available on the NHS. You can get it privately. But this proposal means the UK would join countries like the US in making the vaccination part of routine childhood immunisation programmes. Chickenpox cases decreased during the pandemic because of the restrictions on people socialising, which means there is now a much larger group of children who are not protected against the virus. Before the pandemic, lots of parents tried to make sure their children caught chickenpox off each other, but that method isn't always safe.
The problem with chickenpox parties is 2 things. One is that the children will obviously get chickenpox, which can be very unpleasant. Even when it's mild, the parents often have to take a number of days off work. But what you don't know in those chickenpox parties is which child is going to be the one who ends up with severe illness.
It's now up to the government to decide whether to take on board the recommendations from the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation. Angie says parents should be able to decide what's best for their children.
I used to immunise children, but all the courses and things I've been on about childhood immunisation, never was chickenpox mentioned. And if I'd have known that, I could have made that choice. You know, she'd have her whole life ahead of her.
While the vaccine doesn't guarantee lifetime immunity, it does significantly reduce the number of severe cases, so more children can be protected from this sometimes fatal virus. Alice Porter, Sky News.
President Joe Biden has arrived in San Francisco in the last hour to greet China's President Xi Jinping, who arrives a little later. The pair expected to meet fully tomorrow on the sidelines of an Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. The two leaders last met a year ago, and since then relations have plummeted as wars wage in Ukraine and the Middle East. The two superpowers are hoping to increase cooperation, but face a number of challenges. Well, among them are China's territorial claims. Beijing views the vast majority of the South China Sea as its own, despite rival claims from surrounding countries, including the Philippines. In recent months, there have been frequent confrontations between Chinese and Filipino vessels around disputed islands and reefs, such as the Spratly Islands. Well, the US has reiterated its treaty-bound commitment to defend the Philippines in the event of escalation. President Biden has also promised to defend Taiwan should China launch an invasion. Taiwan is a self-ruled island off China's southeast coast, which China considers a breakaway province. Well, Sky News has been aboard US Navy aircraft carriers stationed in the Philippine Sea, which would form a crucial arm of America's response if tensions in the region were ever to spill over. Our Asia correspondent Helen Ansmith has this report.
It is a 2-hour flight from Japan's southern islands to an arena where tensions are high and so are the stakes. A US aircraft carrier in Asian waters, a window into America's role in some of the world's most contested seas. Jets are always ready here. They can launch as many as 3 every 50 seconds. They're flying in international skies over international waters. But some, like the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea, are areas that China claim as its own. If tensions between these superpowers ever spill over, it will happen here, and these crews will be the front line. China's military is increasingly assertive in these regions. It is a key point of tension. In the tower where they manage the launches and landings, a hint of how often they have to react.
We can get our aircraft in the air very, very quickly. I mean, a matter of minutes, we can get them. So
you've done that recently? Have you scrambled recently?
Yeah, we've put aircraft in the air very, very quickly.
But most alarming is this, US video of Chinese jets flying dangerously close, in this case just 10 feet away. The risk of accident high, the US message direct.
It is dangerous and unprofessional, but that's not the way American mariners and American air pilots fly. We are focused on what our mission is, building up our strengthening and deepening deterrence.
It's against this precarious backdrop that the presidents will meet here in San Francisco. Diplomacy redoubled. Since they last met, relations had plummeted. Disagreements from Taiwan to tech sanctions, from Ukraine to this. The so-called spy balloon saga.
That's my Air Force right there, buddy.
While both sides are now making an effort, meaningful breakthrough is highly unlikely. And back out at sea, it's not hard to see why. China views drills like this between the US and Japan as highly provocative, aggression in its backyard. Nonetheless, there is a shared desire for stabilization. Both quietly fear the alternative. But for all the warm gestures, when you're here, there's a sense of how easily it could all be blasted off course. Helen Ansmith, Sky News in Beijing.
Back here, Sky News has spoken to a senior council officer who says that children with special educational needs are being discriminated against and even deliberately excluded in some cases because schools cannot cope with their requirements. Half of all exclusions last year were children with additional needs, and thousands of children are regularly absent from school through no fault of their own. Sky's People and Politics correspondent Nick Martin reports.
7-year-old Melissa is one of thousands of children with special educational needs to be excluded from mainstream school.
She was lying on the floor, she was throwing things around, really, really distressed. And I had teachers saying to me, we need to have a conversation, it's going to be a really hard conversation to have. She then said, well, this time it's going to be a permanent exclusion. The deputy head was with her. I didn't see it coming at all. I literally had no idea it was coming. So I'm in the middle of this room without my husband, hearing my daughter in massive distress behind me, being told my daughter can never go back to that school again.
Of all the children excluded from school last year in England, 47%, nearly half, had some kind of special educational needs. And while the government says head teachers should be able to permanently exclude as a last resort, it's against the law to do it because a child has additional needs. But we've been told that it does happen.
121212.
Caroline works in a senior position at a large local council. She's been in that role for 20 years. It's her job to find school places for children who've been excluded. To protect her identity, we've reconstructed her interview using an actor.
One teacher actually said to us, look, we're having a cull, so expect a few permanent exclusions in the next 2 weeks. That was someone in a senior leadership position of a secondary school. I remember one head saying, we can only have children in our unit who can cope with the curriculum. We'll have to keep our GCSE results up. How can I put it? They were intelligence cleansing. The system's just falling apart. And any child that looks slightly like that's going to be a problem, they're excluding them. And the main reason is persistent disruptive behaviour.
The school said they don't comment on individual cases, but an investigation into Melissa's exclusion found that the school had failed to support her needs. They concluded that she should never have been permanently excluded. Melissa has settled into a special school now, and she's doing well. But many more like her aren't getting the support they need. Nick Martin, Sky News, Gloucester.
Now the country has marked King Charles's 75th birthday with a series of royal gun salutes. The first was in London's Green Park at midday, where the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery fired a 41-gun salute. While an hour later, near the Tower of London, the Honourable Artillery Company fired a 62-gun salute. But it was a regular working day for the monarch, launching his coronation food project with Queen Camilla in Oxfordshire. Happy birthday from us, obviously. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the chief leader writer at The Observer, Sonia Soda, and the Whitehall editor of the Financial Times, Lucy Fisher. Welcome to both of you. And among the stories, we will be discussing this on the front page of The Eye about today's letter to Rishi Sunak from Suella Braverman, the headline, Revenge Served Hot. Back with that in just a minute. Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories this evening. Suella Braverman has accused Rishi Sunak of failing and of lacking a mandate to be Prime Minister in a scathing letter marking her departure from government. 7 people have been found guilty of running a child abuse ring in Glasgow. And the White House has said that the US has its own intelligence that Hamas is using Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital to run its military operations. Well, hello there. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the chief leader writer at The Observer, Sonia Soda, and the Whitehall editor of the Financial Times, Lucy Fisher. Welcome to both of you. As ever, let's take a look, shall we, at the front pages. Starting with the Eye, revenge served hot. That's how the Eye describes Suella Braverman's parting broadside to Rishi Sunak today after she was sacked as Home Secretary in the cabinet reshuffle. The Express says war has been declared after Ms Braverman accused the PM of betraying the nation. That word betrayal also featuring on the front of tomorrow's Times. This is page 1 of the Daily Mail. We had a deal and you broke it, Suella tells the PM. The Star resurrects a word from the Thatcher era to describe her attack, handbagged. Meanwhile, the arrest of a man over the death of ice hockey player Adam Johnson when his neck was slashed during a game in Sheffield is the lead story for the Metro. And the Financial Times reports on a boost to markets on Wall Street after lower than expected inflation figures for the US economy. But a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of the papers while you watch us. So let's head to our guests then, to Sonia Soda and Lucy Fisher. So much to discuss. Where to start? Oh yes, Suella on the front page of a number of newspapers. A broadside that had been expected. Lucy, did it go further than you expected?
Well, it did. As you say, when she was fired yesterday, she made clear this wasn't the last we'd heard of this, that she would speak out in due course. So I think in Westminster, in Downing Street, people were braced for her reaction. But I think this has surprised many of her colleagues in the, frankly, viciousness of the tone. And in that sense, I think she may not have done herself as many favours as she might have hoped. The language is so strong, accusing the Prime Minister of a betrayal of his promise to do whatever it takes to stop the small boats, accusing him of wishful thinking, magical thinking, weak leadership, equivocation, a lack of interest in stopping irregular migration. That in fact, some of her colleagues on the right of the party, people who are ordinarily quite critical of Sunak in private, believe that in fact that this is quite a narcissistic act and so over the top that they don't want to sort of be seen to be falling in behind her.
Which is interesting because actually this has to be seen as a pitch for this time next year, post-election, which we now presume to be in autumn. That's certainly the mood music that people have been saying. What we're not 100% sure of is how many MPs she takes with her, if she does. Sunak obviously decided that the threat of her on the backbenches wasn't sufficient to block him from sacking her. But what about this deal? Effectively, she was saying, I managed to get you the job as Prime Minister and basically get rid of Boris Johnson. So I was the person who did this for you.
So we all know these deals go on behind closed doors in politics when you've got people competing for the leadership of political parties. What's so unusual, I think, is somebody just coming out and talking about it in public, in the open. It's really not the done thing in Westminster. And what she's saying is, we signed a deal that, you promised me some things in order to get my backing, including, apparently there was a promise on getting net migration down below around, I think it was 280,000 was the figure she mentioned. Stuff on the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, that Sunak would take the UK out of that.
Which becomes critical after tomorrow, but we'll discuss
Absolutely,
that in a moment,
we will come on to that. It's a very news-rich environment. So she's just coming out in the open and saying, look, we have this deal, and you break your promise to me. I don't think voters are that concerned whether Rishi Sunak breaks his promises to Suella Braverman or not. I think they're more interested in what he's doing for the country. But B, I think one of the reasons why she's kind of shot herself in the foot somewhat here is, trust in politics is everything. And once you sort of start going out and going on the record about these deals that were made behind closed doors, I think lots more people than some of your allies might look at you and think, gosh, does this person really have the discretion they need to potentially be leader of the Conservative Party? So I do feel she's rather overshot, as Lucy was saying. You know, she thinks she's got this great political strategy to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. But I think for those of us watching from the outside, it appears she's maybe not playing it quite as well as she thinks she is.
So the eye, revenge served hot, betraying the nation, no mandate, incapable, magical thinking. You've said some of these anyway. Uncertain, weak and lacking in the qualities of leadership that this country needs. I mean, it was excoriating, no doubt about it. But will he miss the voice that she had to the nation on issues like the Stop the Boats pledge, do you think?
Well, look, actually, I think there's been a poll out today suggesting that a majority of the public think that Sunak was right to sack her. I think that may also speak to the way in which she was seen to be going rogue, certainly in terms of rhetoric and tone, if not in policy per se, not only on immigration, but recently on rough sleepers, those notorious comments suggesting that being homeless is somehow a lifestyle choice, which I think, again, went down very badly in her party, including on the right and the sort of religious right. There is a sort of significant minority of kind of Christian MPs on the right who just really don't like that kind of language. Look, I think Rishi Sunak is under pressure on migration. That is clearly the case. But there are many around him who think that that much of the country where they stand is feeling concerned about migration. Often when people can't get a GP appointment, say, they themselves or their children can't get on the housing ladder, they think that that's because too many people are coming to this country, whether legally or illegally. However, I think there are many people around Sunak who think that doesn't mean the public like the kind of rhetoric, again, that Braverman has used, words like invasion, hurricane, and the sense that, you know, demonising migrants isn't where necessarily many of the public are. But it's certainly a live debate in the party at the moment, and in the many MPs, Conservative MPs in the Red Wall, do think that, you know, she is banging the drum in the right way and that this hardline approach will be popular with their constituents. So there is this real split in the party.
Yes, and amongst the hardest line bit has been the Rwanda policy. So it's been a busy news week. It'll be a busy news day on Wednesday, certainly. That is one of the things we're looking ahead to. In the morning, the Supreme Court will rule on the legality of the Rwanda policy to ship people to Rwanda if they land illegally in this country. Now, certainly it's something that Suella Braverman references, but, you know, you take it away for us.
Sure, of course. Well, you summarised it so well there, Anna. But, yes, so, you know, it's a key government policy. They think it will deter people from coming to the UK to seek asylum if they have a policy that everybody, as soon as they come to the UK, will be detained and then deported at the first available opportunity to what they call a third safe country, and their asylum claims will be processed there instead. The only such country that they've got to deal with is Rwanda, and the numbers are very small for it. The issue is that is this lawful? Under UK law, under, you know, human rights law is part of the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, is part of UK law under our Human Rights Act. And a case has been taken and it's working its way through the various stages of the court. The Court of Appeal, which is the last court to look at it, said, in theory, this policy is legal. You could deport somebody to a safe third country, but Rwanda is not a third safe country because of the terrible outcomes there for asylum seekers, the fact that actually so few people from the countries that are in conflict actually succeed in getting asylum there. So the Court of Appeal were like, you can have this policy, but Rwanda is not on the cards, and then all of a sudden the government's got not a single country and they've got tens of thousands of people arriving in the UK a year to claim asylum, which is lower than a lot of European countries, I must say. It's now going to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has to look and see whether the Court of Appeal made the right decision. It will either say that the Court of Appeal got it right and actually the government can't have this policy, or it will say that the Court of Appeal was wrong and the government can start deporting people to Rwanda. So it's kind of a big thing for the government because it partly determines whether their policy will work or not, although I have to say, I think on a practical level, there are so many other reasons it's not going to work, even if it's lawful.
Well, there's the Daily Express, war is declared. Suella accuses Rishi of betraying the nation. The Daily Star as well. on a news story. Tories in a tears, handbagged. And just very quickly on Rwanda as well, Suella Braverman making clear that actually Rishi Sunak does not want to take the UK out of the ECHR, if I got that right round, and align himself, therefore, with countries that are out, which include Russia and Belarus.
Yeah, well, interestingly, Suella Braverman's covered herself on either outcome tomorrow. She said even if the Supreme Court goes with the government, well, in fact, Rishi Sunak has insisted on compromises to the legislation that means in practice the country will struggle, the government will struggle to deport people to Rwanda. There aren't enough safeguards against legal challenges being brought. And then she says if the ruling goes against the government, again, she blames Rishi Sunak and accuses him of failing to come up with a credible plan B, as she puts it. One scenario that I don't think's got enough airtime in the past 24 hours is the possibility that even if the Supreme Court goes against the government and says this policy is not lawful, there are other European countries that are now looking at similar models for processing asylum seekers offshore, including Germany, that's looking at non-EU countries. So it does feel to me that there could be growing momentum across the EU, across Europe, I should say, for perhaps reforming the ECHR.
Yeah, Austria and Italy. Italy, I think, to send to Albania, which would be interesting, wouldn't it? Anyway, more on that to come, no doubt, in the 11. But coming up next, straight to work, Lord Cameron has announced sanctions against 4 Hamas leaders in one of his first moves as Foreign Secretary. Back with that and more in a moment.
This script, I'm gonna teach each and every one of you to be the best.
This is the greatest company in the world!
That scene, was really positive and amazing, empowering kids to become great salespeople. And I got to crack the code for how to train them effectively. Obviously, there's things that happened afterwards that weren't so great, but I look back at that moment with pride. That I had these young kids that were having trouble closing, and I came up with a new way of teaching them and kind of approaching a sale that revolutionized the sales industry. That was in fact my last book that I wrote was called The Way of the Wolf, which was about how to sell, how to close the deal, and so forth. So I wrote a new book now on investing, which is a whole different thing. But it starts with being what I call a passive long-term investor versus trying to trade for the short term and time the market. Timing the market, trying to pick individual stocks is very difficult to do. And what happens is if you do it the opposite way and you become a passive investor and buy an index like the S&P 500, which historically does very well, your FTSE 250 is a nice long-term. It's not your 100, the 250, right? So by doing that, essentially, you take out the guesswork of trying to pick an individual stock, and then you buy in a whole, and you make sure that you buy it in a type of fund that has very low expenses, no performance bonuses. You're not looking to beat the market, you're looking to be the market. If you put it in the proper type of account, you can take a very small amount of money and, over time, if you're patient, by reinvesting your dividends and a little bit more, whatever you can, every quarter, every month, right? Just small amounts. You can take a small amount of money and turn it into a giant nest egg when you're ready to retire. One major regret was that I really wish I would have taken my entire firm and just had all the clients buy the S&P 500 versus, be selling an index fund, essentially, being a large mutual fund versus, selling low price stocks, venture capital stocks. Because ultimately, listen, clients lost money. I went to jail. And the firm itself, though, was a beautiful thing, teaching young kids to close. And people made a lot of money, but I was selling the wrong product, the wrong type of investments. That's a huge regret I have.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me, once again. The chief leader at The Observer, Sonia Soda, and the Whitehall editor of the Financial Times, Lucy Fisher. Welcome back to both of you. Lucy, should we go to Gaza? Real concern now about what's happening around the hospitals, certainly. But David Cameron, new Foreign Secretary, the Metro tells us is already hard at work.
Yes, day one in the role, and he's taken this move to sanction 4 Hamas leaders and 2 financiers of Hamas. I'm interested, this to me in some ways looks more of a signal that he's arrived in the Foreign Office and has got straight to work, because Hamas is already a prescribed terrorist organisation in the UK, which means being associated with it in any way, a member, a leader, financing it, involved in any administration, even bearing or promoting the logo is already illegal and subject to very high criminal penalties. So whether this takes it very much further in practice is questionable, but certainly it is a signal. It's something the UK has done in concert with the US and is designed perhaps as a gesture of solidarity to Israel at a time when the government is also becoming a little bit more critical of the ongoing bombardment and activity in Gaza.
Got 30 seconds left to talk about cervical cancer and the success of the HPV vaccination programme.
So the chief executive of the NHS is saying that we may eliminate cervical cancer by 2040, which is amazing because at the moment it kills, I think it's over 800 women a year, mostly in their 30s, die of cervical cancer. It's 2 things. It's partly the vaccine, which has been incredibly effective. It's just one of those unambiguously good medical news stories. It's really cutting down cancer rates, or it will do, amongst that generation. And then it's the cervical cancer screening programme, smear tests. 1 in 3 women still miss their smear tests, their regular smear tests. So there's another push to say, please go and get your smear test if you get called for one.
On the day that chickenpox vaccination was recommended.
We'll be talking
as well.
more about vaccines later.
Sonia Soda and Lucy Fisher, thank you both very much indeed. Thank you. Let's take a look at the weather then.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, we are in for an unsettled week with showery days followed by further spells of wind and rain. There'll be a mostly mild but breezy start tomorrow with showery rain for much of the rather cloudy north, but southern parts do look mostly fine. There'll be just the odd shower in the southwest. Ireland, Northern Ireland, Wales, central and southern England and northern Scotland, that's nearly all the UK apart from that strip, as you can see, will be mostly fine through the morning with any early showers soon fading. But central and southern Scotland and northern England will remain fairly cloudy with outbreaks of rain slowly easing. It will be breezy and a bit cooler than today. Rain in the north will continue to ease through the afternoon with most places dry by evening. There'll be little change elsewhere, although the wind will drop. Thursday will start fine for most with a frost or ground frost in the north, but early rain in the southwest will spread to all but Scotland by the evening. Clearer skies and a scattering of showers will follow to the southwest. It'll turn windy as well near southern coasts.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, Sonia and Lucy back with us for Sky News at 11. All the latest after Suella Braverman hits out at the Prime Minister, accusing him of failure and betrayal. Our news review and press preview coming up next.